Welcome to Prey vs. Predator, the podcast.
In the animal kingdom, prey survive by using their senses to escape their predator. Predators in the wild are identified quickly. They look like danger, smell like danger, and will consume you if you don't act fast. In the human world, the predators look like you, smell like you, act like you. So, how does a human prey survive?
Does your relationship make you feel crazy? Like you're walking on eggshells, like you can never say or do the right thing? Are you scared that if you make a mistake, you will be devoured in one bite? Are you criticized, controlled, punished, or lorded over with contempt? Are you in a relationship with a predator?
The purpose of this podcast is to arm prey with the skills and tools they need to identify, avoid, escape, or survive a predator. This is Prey
Versus
Predator. Hi, I'm Jill. Last season, I told you about my background with a predator. One of the big things I learned through living my story was to keep myself connected and aware of what's going on in my life. That's what I'm passionate about for this Prey versus Predator community. I ask the questions that keep you looking at your big picture. I'm going to help you see the moments when wisdom visits you, and together we will acknowledge the hard calls and celebrate the good. When I'm not listening to or thinking about questions, stories, or questions about stories, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a hospital supervisor, and I'm a musician.
Hi, I'm PJ. Last season, I shared my story of what I experienced living life with a predator partner and a bit of what post-predator life has been like. I had to learn an entire new language to express and understand what had happened to me. I have always loved people and listening to their stories and learning from their experiences. As a social worker, I bring clinical experience, but my real passion comes from a deep desire to walk alongside and protect fellow prey.
Hi, I'm Amber. My predator is a parent that I am still in relationship with. It is sometimes heartbreakingly tough to keep the relationship going, but I have learned a lot about myself and how amazingly strong and resilient I am. My pain has fueled my passion for performing and for keeping this PvP community alive. I want people to know they're not alone. That is the gift of the arts, but also the gift of us telling our stories here on this podcast. You are not alone. Let's be brave and make something beautiful together. #PrayPower.
Welcome back to Prey vs. Predator Season 2. We are so happy to be back. We are ready to dive into some deep conversations and have a few new guests and grow this Prey versus Predator community. For today, we are going to summarize some of the things we did in Season 1. So let's start from the very beginning. What is Prey versus Predator? What is it that we are doing? Amber, tell everybody.
Okay, I'm going to offer the question. Why are we doing this? I know for myself, I'm doing this because I believe that we need to help those in the world or our listeners who have these types of relationships and don't know how to navigate it. And it can be very confusing, especially if you've got a predator parent, which is my story.
Mm-hmm.
So, PJ or...
Well, I know,
Jill?
I remember Brene Brown. I always talk about her. She said in one of her TED Talks, I think, that the two most powerful words in the English language are "me too." And if somebody who's listening hears something and they're like, "Oh, gee, I'm not alone. Me too." Like, that is powerful.
Absolutely. And I think that part of our goal here, because these are, we call it predatory behavior. And we use that language really because we're trying to get across that this is not just an average, normal relationship issue, that there are unique behaviors that we can identify and put a language to that are exceptionally painful and difficult and traumatizing. And when we see people who display these behaviors and traits, on a consistent and persistent basis without any sign of being able to or willing to stop, then we want to put them in a separate category because they do so much damage. And anybody in this type of community where you're talking about predatory behavior, we know that finding a language can be very challenging and difficult. So we're trying to put words to it. We're trying to build a language. We're trying to say me too. We're trying to express this is something different. And I think going forward, we'd like to advocate changes in our social networks, our community, maybe even our legal system, because there's so much damage done.
Yeah, I really like what you said about creating a language. I know for so many of us, we know that something's weird, but to explain it to someone,
Right.
like I know PJ, in your situation, it wasn't even something that you and I necessarily even talked about, because it was like, well, what is it? Like,
Right.
what is going on?
Because at the time, I think it's getting better as more of these types of communities are opening up. It is getting better, but there was literally no language for something like gaslighting. If you don't know what is being done to you, all you feel is confused. And it's the tendency of prey to assume that it must be them who's being confused, or that they're wrong for being confused, or they must just not understand.
And I want to go on that. I feel like we're creating for prey, and we'll get into our definitions a bit later. But those are people that there is power, there is strength. You're not just a victim. You're not just somebody who's being used by a predator. You have some autonomy, some power, some resilience, and we want to empower those people. And that they're beautiful the way they are. You don't have to become predatory in order to be powerful.
And I think the other thing that's interesting here is there's a lot in the literature that tries to sort of re-victimize the victim. And they try to suggest that there's something about people in these abusive types of relationships that somehow they are enmeshed or codependent, or that they want to be, they're getting something
broken.
out.
There's something wrong with them.
And I think, like, Amber, I think of you. I think you were a child. So children are victims all the time. And it's not because, they are, they're enmeshed with their parent. It's because they're innocent victims. And what's true about prey is usually quite true about children as well.
Well, and also children will tend to take ownership of the problem. Like, it's me. Mommy and daddy are separating. Well, I did something wrong. Mommy's mad at me. I must have done something wrong. Daddy's stomping around the house. What did I do?
Yeah, and I think that's a great example of, like, anybody can be victim to this type of behavior. Some people are more prone to being and when we talk about prey, we do tend to kind of characterize them in certain way, which we'll talk about. But I think when you have a situation where you have these innocent children who are just wanting to love and be loved, and they are this sort of predatory behavior comes into play, the damage it does is so profound and so much different than a parent who overcorrects, or who's a helicopter parent, or who is too strict or not strict enough. We are not talking about normal everyday failings of our humanity. We're talking about a specific set of behaviors.
So for our new listeners, maybe let's just introduce ourselves. Maybe, Amber, what makes you prey?
My story is that my mom is a predator, and she would do behaviors that were very confusing to me as a child. So I never had words. I never had language. I didn't understand. I grew up in a very religious environment. So it was always the parent was the number one, right? And you were number two. You had to obey. So it was very confusing. I would listen to the episode. You can listen to my episode. I tell my story in more depth. But essentially, growing up, I've realized that this person I love, my mother, is a predator, and I have to do certain things to protect myself when I'm around her. And I am still in relationship because most times we're not. When we leave these predatory relationships, we're not. But I have continued to be in relationship because I have a family. And I have quite a small family, so it's quite important for me to remain. And I think there is a spectrum of predatory behavior. And there is times where my mother is actually learning, and when she's at her best, she's quite good. And that's how I always think of it. That's who she was made to be. But essentially, her damage, her trauma, everything outweighs that, and she becomes quite predatory. And so I just have to protect myself. And there's nothing wrong with me. And that is what the biggest thing that she will do when I piss her off by having a look on my face.
Disappoint her.
Yeah, disappoint her. But even just like I'll cut my hair a different way and she'll give me a look. That's her problem. And you've had to learn to detach from that experience. Her reaction is not my problem. And she can have her own issues. They're not my issues. So that's a little bit about me. How about you, PJ?
So I'm PJ, and I come into this environment through being both a social worker and through lived experience with the predator. For many, many, many years, experienced being in an intimate relationship with someone who very consistently and very covertly behaved in ways, and because the abuse was so covert, very few people saw it. In fact, even though I felt it, I had no words for it, and my frustration, in hindsight, and you'll hear I'm quite passionate around this, is there was literally nowhere for me to turn that explained what was happening to me. So whether that was going to counselors, which you'll see in our blog, whether that was going to books, this language kept coming up. Marriage is a dance. There's all these, you must be playing a role. If you change, your relationship will change. So I believed it, and that really locked me in for a long time, a long, long time. So that's part of the passion I bring is I don't want anybody to lose a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades of their life. And I don't want a community not understanding that this is not that. This is something really different, and it will crush you and break you because it's not really a relationship. I liken it to a type of slavery. And I use that word cautiously because it's not slavery. But it's experientially a type of the depth and breadth of control is so overwhelming in this type of situation.
And I think for me, it was my intimate relationship with a predator was just characterized by fear every day. I can't think of a day that we were together that I was not afraid. And PJ, you really dove into the clinical side of things. If you can just fix yourself clinically, then things will be okay. And for me, it was if I can just fix myself through a deeper relationship with God, then things will be fine. And I prayed for my predator ad nauseum. It was almost manic. It was daily. It was 24/7. I worked in the church for many, many years. Everything I did was around me growing my relationship with God because I thought if I was more godly, then my predator would treat me differently.
And that was the message you got repeatedly, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mhm.
Please listen to our stories.
Yeah.
And I would say the same. Yeah. I was more than happy to look at anything. And because I had a belief, this is what the person is telling me is failed and flawed about me. And hey, totally agreed. Those things are failures. They're flaws. They're brokenness. I can work at correcting them. I can work at healing that. I can be this for you. I can be that for you. I can do better. And throw down the gauntlet. I love a good challenge, especially in personal growth. So it really, it takes a lot of years of working and growing and trying before you kind of come full circle and you realize that, oh, this is not about me growing. Because as soon as you meet the bar goes in a different
That's right,
direction.
exactly.
Always, the rules are always shifting.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's the thing for us to realize,
Yeah.
you know, as prey when you're in relationship with a predator. And I would just acknowledge that please listen to our stories because PJ's is a great story, 2-parter, and Jill's, she starts everything off for us. So please re-listen to our stories in season 1.
Maybe we should just define terms. Like, what do we mean by the word prey? Because sometimes that can be confusing. People are like, "What? Why are you proud of being a prey?" Amber, you're great at explaining stuff. What's a prey?
Well, we have a lovely definition here. I'll read some of it. Kind, loving, responsible, low maintenance, low need. I think that's important. It's like, I will be what you need me to be in relationship. Easygoing, I would say. Relationship oriented. That's really important, that we are focused on the people in our lives. We want to be connected. We often, as prey, we think of others before ourselves. We will struggle to say no, and that's a big one. And we are fearful or can be triggered by conflict, anger, or loss of relationship. And that's huge. So if the parent in my case says, I'm not going to talk to you until you say sorry, when you're a 6-year-old prey, that's terrifying because in your mind, they will never talk to you again.
That's right.
I would add that I think prey are also tend to be quite independent. Like when I look around the table, and certainly everybody that we've talked to, they tend to have an independent part of themselves, like, you know, that kind of low need, like I'm a giver, not a taker.
Self-sufficiency.
Yeah, and kids, of course, are in their own bracket because kids, like you were saying, Amber, they tend to just do this anyways. They tend to be very naturally sort of looking to the parent to get their needs met. And then predators.
Predators, wow, they're individuals who are invested in using another person to meet their own needs with little to no regard for the well-being of the other. I mean, that is powerful. They often mirror their prey's kind, loving, and generous behaviors in order to entice them into a relationship.
I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, that is.
And I would add to that a little bit in terms of the predator being able to. There's very specific tools and techniques that the predator uses to keep you in the relationship. And I think that's what we're trying to get here today. Because if you can identify some of those behaviors before you get in a relationship, while you're in a relationship, or to get out of a relationship, or even when you are out, to be able to look back and realize, oh, that's why.
That's what happened.
I was so confused or broken. And we do hear in common, culture, we hear words like borderline, narcissist, that type of thing. And I would say that, yes, those are included in our kind of description of predators. The reason that we're trying to use this type of language is to really make it clear that you are not safe. And I think people, when they see a label like narcissist, they'll go down the checklist of 500 different things and go, well, he's not grandiose, or she's not, she can be really generous sometimes.
So we're simplifying the language, and we're also making it less clinical too, because that's not our point here.
Yeah, exactly. And we want to look at, there are tools and techniques that predators use that healthy, normal people, even not healthy, but normal people, even broken, traumatized people don't use predatory behaviors. Right. Gaslighting is pretty specific to predators.
Yeah. Okay, so what did we do in season 1? We introduced ourselves.
And we told our story. So again, please listen to our stories.
We had a couple of guests.
Yeah.
Awesome guests.
And we're going to have at least one of those guests is going to return in season 2.
Our guests were Sophia, amazing story, and Daryl, our amazing
a male
guest.
Because a lot of people do assume that prey are female,
Right.
predators are male. Absolutely not true.
No.
You know, for example, Amber, yours is a female. Daryl's was a female. Even though he was, you know, had the money and he had the muscles and all that kind of stuff, he was prey because of his nature.
So it's not gender specific.
Absolutely.
It's open season for who's a predator and who's a prey.
And we liked Sophia so much that we're going to have her back this season.
Yeah. She'll continue the
At
story.
least once.
So it'll be amazing to go back and hear her story as well, because wow, what an incredible.
We also talked about what is gaslighting, what do healthy boundaries look like, what is love bombing.
Predator awareness kits.
Yeah.
So that's a term that we have, which is just something you can take away with you, something that you can take home with you, that you can pack in your mind, the recesses. You can go, okay, what can I take with me? Oh, I know what gaslighting is, because we're giving you the terms.
It's like having a label for the red flag.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like you have a spice drawer with like blank red labels. This is like basil. It's different than dill.
Good.
It's like gaslighting is different than love bombing. You know, it's a red. Sometimes you can even feel it's a red flag, or people around you can see it's a red flag, but they don't know what red flag it is.
I don't have a name for it.
And we are labeling specific things.
Yeah. So other than going deeper into some stories, we want to talk some about the importance of story. We want to talk about religious abuse.
This is season 2.
This
You're
is
talking
season 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Season 2.
I know. I can't even believe that we're here. Amber, tell us more about what's going on in season 2.
I think you described it perfectly. We're looking into religious trauma or abuse and how there's predators in those environments and how we can be victim to those things if you're a prey. We also are looking at more stories, more people's stories, hopefully more guests.
Listener questions.
We
have so many questions from you guys. It's really encouraging, and we so appreciate just the interaction with them.
What else are we doing this season? We are going more into stories, things that have happened as a child of a predator, the way that there's a sense of powerlessness that can come over a child or even an adult person who's been raised by a predator, and how to regain your sense of independence and power and autonomy and feeling like you have value.
And just the fact that it is not my responsibility to meet your needs.
Absolutely.
Wow, what a concept.
And we are blowing it up this season. We are including a blog.
Woohoo!
From all, the three of us each have our own voice and our own unique perspective, and you're going to see it in black and white.
Another thing I wanted to talk about was forgiveness versus
repentance.
Repentance.
Yes.
What does reconciliation look like?
Saying sorry is just not enough, which a lot of predators will
sorry
say.
Isn't even the first thing that you do. It's like the third thing that you do. Anyway, that's a great episode too.
We're also going to do a YouTube channel this year, so check that out. I'm going to take a deep dive into really specific predatory behaviors where you can see in pop culture. So we're going to look at some of the videos, movies, documentaries, and I'm going to really hone in on moments and show you when you see this, that's called this. You see how this person's doing that? It's this. You see the effect on that person? Now you know why that prey acted the way that prey did. We don't understand sometimes why people react the way they do to this type of abuse. So I want to explore that a little bit so that we can really identify it. So we've got
a lot going on.
We've got so much.
We've got so much that everyone should be looking forward to, and we really appreciate our listeners. And we want to hear from you, so please.
And thank you to all of you who have reached out. That's just been
It means the world, because that's why we're here. We're here. You are not alone.
Email, Instagram, Patreon, however way you can find us, please reach out because we want to hear from you. We want to hear your stories, and maybe we'll hear them live on the air.
Yeah, exactly. So with all that being said, thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much.
And enjoy season 2. It's going to be so good. So if our first season was Prey versus Predator 101, season 2 is 201. So it might be a wise thing for you guys to go back and listen to the first season if you haven't already. It's really foundational, really good stories, really profound insight.
Whether you're a first-time listener or a regular, thanks again for tuning in. We launch a new episode every week, so subscribe to our podcast to make sure you get notified whenever a new episode drops.
To learn more and engage with us further, check us out on social media at Prey vs. Predator. We post regular tidbits and clips from our podcast to help support and empower our growing Prey community. We also have a YouTube channel where PJ does some deeper dives into prey and predator dynamics that we find in pop culture, such as movies, TV shows, or current events.
Everything we do is intended to support and empower you, our listeners. So if you appreciate what we do and want to support us, consider leaving a rating and review, and share this podcast with friends and family so it can get out to those who need it. You might also consider supporting us financially on Patreon. We have a number of perks available to people who give, and every little bit helps us to continue to create this content.